Hi folks, in this video I'm going to be talking to you about the harmonica and the blues and the complex music theory that underlies them. The harmonica is a very simple instrument, but it was not designed to play the blues at all. It was designed to play very different music. Specifically, it was designed to play the popular music of Germany in the mid-19th century, which is the time and place where it was invented. So here's what the harmonica was intended for, to play stuff like this. That's what the harmonica is for. Let's break it down a little bit. So this is a C harmonica, meaning it can only play the notes from the key of C major. So here's the C major scale. These are the only notes that a C harmonica can play. And when you blow on the harmonica, you get this. So that is a C major chord. And the harmonica can, when you blow on it, just plays those three notes, C, E, and G, up in octaves. When you suck on the harmonica, when you inhale through it, you get the rest of the notes from the C major scale. And the harmonica is very unusual because most wind instruments don't do anything when you inhale through them, but the harmonica does. So when you inhale, you get the notes G, B, D, F, and A. That is a G dominant ninth chord. It's the 5 chord in C major. So really all you can do with the harmonica is you can blow and play the 1 chord in C, and you can draw, inhale, and you get the 5 chord. And then together, if you alternately blow and draw, you can play the C major scale. So like, and that is not a lot, but it's enough to play German pop music of the mid-19th century. And if you're very determined, you can even play a little bit of classical music. So here, I'm going to attempt it, is the beginning of Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring by Johann Sebastian Bach. Here we go. So the harmonica came to America in the late 19th century, along with a lot of German immigrants. And in America, it got used to play American folk music, which the European version of American folk music sounds a lot like European music because the people playing it were descended from Europeans. So you get stuff like this. So that's O Susanna. It's a minstrel song. It's got a really terrible racist past, but that's America for you. Okay, so at some point between 1870 and 1920, some African-American person realized something about the harmonica, which is, if you mentally reverse the role of the blown notes and the drawn notes, you can play in a totally different key from the one that the harmonica was intended for. So recall that when you draw through the harmonica, you get this G7 chord, or G9th chord. So what this African-American person realized was, if you think of that as the 1 chord, and you think of the blown note as the 4 chord, you don't have to play in C major at all. You can play in G mixolydian mode. So I'm going to switch the accordion here to G mixolydian. Now, this is the exact same notes as C major. If you play it from C to C, it's still the C major scale, but we're not thinking of C as the 1 chord anymore. Now we're thinking of C as the 4 chord. We're thinking of G7 as the 1 chord. We're thinking of this as home bass. And what happens when you play the harmonica backwards like this is it sounds quite different. Sounds like the blues, yeah? But there's one thing that's missing if you want to play the blues, and that is blue notes. Blue notes are notes that are in between the piano keys. And the way you play them on the harmonica is you draw with this particular technique where you kind of drop your tongue lower in your mouth. It's hard to verbalize it. It's a technique called bending. So here's bending. So what I'm doing is making those notes, those drawn notes, go deliberately out of tune. And you can see what I'm doing over here in Ableton Live. So I'm going to be using the tuner. So here's a D. And I bent it down to C sharp. I think I can bend it all the way down to C, actually. Well, not quite, but I can bend it down pretty far. Here's B. I can bend it all the way down to A, and all the notes in between. Yeah, I can hit that note in between B and B flat. That is the neutral third, the blue third. Here's D. And get that C sharp, which is an important note in the G blues scale. And I can get the note in between C sharp and D, which is a very important blue note. Let's take a look at the G blues scale in the accordion. Yeah, got that C sharp. So that was an amazing discovery. Because now it's possible to play the harmonica in a way that doesn't sound like German, polka music at all. So what I've got here is a loop of a song by Lightnin' Hopkins called "Baby You're Not Gonna Make a Fool Out of Me" from 1948. He recorded it in F, but I transposed it up to G, so I can play along with it on my C harmonica. So that's the blues. And the harmonica is limited. Can't play a lot of different chords with it, can't play a lot of different notes with it, but what you can do with it is articulate your notes so they're very speechy. Yeah, you can bend the pitch, you can tongue, you can also use your hands to do filtering, to do EQ. So there's a lot of speech-like articulation that you can do, and a lot of fine microtonal shading and timbral shading. And this is the stuff that you need for African-American vernacular music. It's less about harmonic complexity, though it can be harmonically complex, and more about sonic complexity, about an individuality of tone, about this kind of speech-like linguistic expression with the instrument. It is possible to play the harmonica quite virtuosically, but when we think about excellent harmonica playing, we're thinking more about soul and expression and less about technical complexity. I mean, technical complexity on the harmonica is cool, but it's not the main thing. And the same thing is true for blues guitar and blues singing and blues saxophone and blues trombone and blues piano, etc., etc., etc. But that stuff is stylistic. The main music theoretical thing is to think about the fact that whoever this African American person was back in between 1870 and 1920, they had the presence of mind to think that the C major scale, if you play it from 5 to 5, if you play this G mixolydian mode, you can no longer play Western tonal music with it. There is no longer a 5 chord, a dominant 7th chord in mixolydian mode. The 5 chord mixo is D minor. And that sounds really cool, but there's no leading tone. There's no F sharp. You can't play a 5-1 cadence with it. And the harmonica was designed to only play 5-1 cadences, right? If you play it the way it's supposed to be played in the key of C, all you can play is C, the 1, and G7, the 5. If you play it backwards in what's called cross harp or second position or blues harmonica, if you think of the drawn notes as 1, then you can play the blues. You can play that dominant 7th chord, you can play that triad, but you can't really resolve it. You can't do the most basic thing in Western tonal harmony. What you can do is play the blues. And that was an extraordinarily subversive thing to do with this instrument. There is this term black vernacular technological creativity. If you want to read about it, there's a link in the description of this video. And I see a strong connection between the way that blues musicians misappropriated the harmonica to the way that rock guitarists misappropriated the electric guitar, and specifically the amp of the electric guitar, to the way that hip-hop artists misappropriated the turntable and the digital sampler. I mean, that really is the story of African American music, which is the story of global popular culture. So the reason this impacts music theory pedagogy is that if you study music theory formally, you learn the rules of Western tonal harmony and the major scale diatonic harmony. And you learn about cadences for months before you learn about any other kind of harmony. But in the music that most Americans enjoy listening to, namely rock, country, blues, hip-hop, techno, there's not a lot of 5-1 cadences. In fact, you can, at this point, listen to the radio for a long time and not hear any 5-1 cadences at all. So formal music theory pedagogy is mostly operating as if we're in Europe in the 19th century, where everything is really based around 1-5, 1-5, 1-5. Meanwhile, in America, popular music of every different kind has mostly left that tradition behind. I mean, we're still using 5-1 for things like musical theater and hymns and these kind of more conservative types of popular music. But for the blacker stuff, the blues, and all the music that descends from it, which is a lot of stuff, we're really not using Western tonal harmony in the same way. And meanwhile, we've introduced all this other stuff, all these blue notes, these microtones. And the blues has kind of faded in significance compared to its peak pop cultural relevance in the 50s and 60s, when rock and roll was basically just blues played too loud. But the blues is still there. I mean, there's an Outkast track called Rosa Parks, and in the middle of it, there's like a totally believable blues harmonica break. Also, the blues indirectly influenced hip-hop pretty heavily, not like in terms of tonal harmony or anything, but in terms of rhythmic speaking, which we now know as rap. If you listen to a lot of old blues songs, particularly John Lee Hooker, he's literally rapping. Yeah, like the flows are a little bit different from what they're using now, but there's a much stronger through line, right, from rap back to the blues than there is from rap back to anything from Western Europe. So there's a struggle going on. If you want to teach music theory in a way that's maximally culturally relevant for Americans, you got to be able to talk about the blues. And the blues is really rare to find in formal music theory teaching materials. And when I say rare, I mean vanishingly rare. Now, if you do jazz theory, they talk about the blues because there is no jazz without the blues. But jazz theory is kind of an esoteric specialty. And if you just take a class called music theory, what you're really learning is the rules of Mozart and Beethoven. And that music is very beautiful and very historically important, but it's also missing some critical information that you will need in order to play the blues. So when I learned how to play the harmonica back in high school, what I had to figure out was, oh, so the harmonica says C on it, but I can only use it to play blues songs in G. And if I want to play a blues song in C, I'm going to need an F harmonica. Meanwhile, if I want to play a blues song in D, then I'm going to need an A harmonica. It was very confusing. It took me years to figure out, oh, because, yeah, okay, the key on the harmonica is a major scale, but you need the Mixolydian mode of that major scale, so you need to be like one step around the circle of fifths. Look in the blog post linked in this description for some unpacking of what all of that means. It's very confusing, and I was right to be confused. It's a complicated story. So anyway, I recommend learning how to play the harmonica. It's pretty easy. It's a lot of fun. And in doing so, you will be experiencing the great racial political struggle of Western music theory. Have fun. Thanks for watching.